Well, we've had one story about Uncle Al, or technically Great Uncle Al, but as I said before, we call the people from that generation our aunts and uncles. But there are sometimes some stories that I heard, again in my childhood, so probably not, the retelling is not going to be very accurate, but they're fun anyway. There were a couple of times where he got by off of sheer bravado and an iron will. And one of these times was when he discovered that badgers can outrun horses in a short run. Now, see, Uncle Al, as you may recall, was a cowboy. And this happened when he was still young and dumb. Now, I say that lightly because, I'm in my 40s, and when I'm in my 60s, I'm going to look back fondly at this stage of life and tell people how young and dumb I was, and I'm fully aware of this. So, this is a young and dumb story. But when he was a cowboy, a large part of being a cowboy was you had to be able to do your job, obviously, but also you had to prove to everybody else around you that you could do your job. It's all about social standing. And a part of that is showing off to your friends, because it's just what happens. Well, he and his buddies, as the people that he was riding herd with, they had been out for a couple of months, and they were getting bored by this point. So they were challenging each other to do really, really stupid things, because that's what young men do when you leave them alone and they get bored. And one day, one of them sees a badger come popping up out of its hole. Now, a lot of people might not know this, but where I grew up on the eastern plains of Colorado, there actually are a fair amount of badgers and other little ground-dwelling critters. People tend to not realize that, or at least there used to be. A lot of people think it's just flat and there's nothing out there. Well, they saw this badger pop its head up out of its hole. And part of being a cowboy was, you had to be able to rope the cattle, and it's actually not very easy to do. And they had been challenging each other to do things like rope that cactus over there, or let's see how many of the herd you can catch in 2 minutes, or other similar things. Well, it was Uncle Al's turn, and one of his buddies saw this badger poke its head up out of its hole, and he goes, "Hey, Al, I betcha you can't rope that badger before it pops down in." And Uncle Al gets out his rope and flips it around his head twice and pops that rope right over the head of that badger, which is great and fine, and everybody's hooping and hollering, having a good old time. And then that badger comes boiling up out of that hole, and he is not happy, as one can imagine. And so Uncle Al was trying to flip his rope and trying to get it off of this badger, but the badger is too close to the ground for him to be able to flip the rope off. And he feels the tugging at it, and he turns around and he sees Uncle Al there on his horse. And this horse is well trained. It's been out there riding the herd with Uncle Al for a few years, and he knows you get the rope thrown out, you back up. So the horse is backing up, and it's pulling on this rope, and this badger is on the end of this rope. And badgers are not shy creatures. They're also not very happy creatures. They tend to be fairly grouchy and fairly aggressive. So this badger sees this horse backing up, and this rope is tugging on it in the same direction the horse is going. And it turns around and it just charges Uncle Al on his horse. And it's not happy. And it's out for blood. So Uncle Al turns his horse around and he spurs it on as fast as he can. He's still flipping the rope, trying to get it off, trying to get it off, trying to get it off. And the badger is outrunning his horse. And his buddies start hooping and hollering, and finally, it takes them a few seconds, but one of them realizes that this could end very poorly if the badger gets a hold of that horse. It could lame that horse up and possibly kill it if it gets down on the ground. And of course, Uncle Al is in the saddle. He's not going anywhere. He's going to stay up on top of that horse for as long as he can, unless it goes down, in which case he's going to have to jump free and get out the way very quickly. So they start chasing after this badger on their horses and trying to rope it and trying to get it off and trying to distract it so that Uncle Al can get his rope off. Eventually, because badgers are not made for a long run, it slows down enough that and kind of settles down enough and gets confused by everybody riding around it. Now Uncle Al is finally able to get his rope off of this thing. And once he gets his rope back, all of his buddies, he and his buddies, they start riding back as hard as they can to get back to the herd, because they've left the herd behind at this point, because they were trying to get the badger away from Uncle Al. And they eventually get back to the herd and get them all rounded up again, because a few of them had spooked a little bit and wandered off. But Uncle Al discovered that day that yes, in fact, badgers can outrun horses in a short haul.